Do you know what the rotator cuff is? And do you know what the rotator cuff does? Before I did this video, I talked to a lot of different people and I asked them what the rotator cuff is and what it does. And I'd say 95% of the people got it totally wrong, and only one person answered it fairly correctly. So I know there's a lot of confusion around what it is and what its function is. So today we're going to talk about the anatomy of the rotator cuff, and then you'll have a much better understanding of what it is and what it's supposed to do and how you use it from day to day. The rotator cuff is composed of four muscles that are deep within the shoulder that attach to the scapula and hold the humerus to the shoulder joint, which is called the glenohumeral shoulder joint. These muscles are buried deep within the shoulder. So here you see the pec major, the deltoids, the traps, and the latissimus dorsi. These are the primary movers of the shoulder itself. So under these muscles is buried the four muscles of the rotator cuff. Now the shoulder joint is composed of the humerus, and it fits into this depression right here. So at any one time, only 1/3 of that head is actually within that depression. And this creates a high amount of mobility, but it also creates a lot of potential stability issues. To hold the shoulder joint together of the rotator cuff, we have the four muscles, which are known by this acronym, which is the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis. So first off, the rotator cuff, it does not originate in this area. It originates from your scapula and it connects your shoulder together. And when you find this bony outcrop on your shoulder, this is an important landmark. This is called the top of your acromion process. And as we get into the anatomy, you'll see how this becomes really important with the rotator cuff and the types of injuries that people get with it. The first one we're going to talk about is the supraspinatus, and it lies on the top of your shoulder blade above what's called the spine of the scapula. Here you can see what is called the spine of the scapula, and now you can see where the supraspinatus muscle lies. So the supraspinatus goes underneath the acromion and then attaches to the top of the actual arm bone, which is called the humerus. So on its own, its job is to lift the arm up, which is called shoulder adduction. So as you saw from the lesson, the supraspinatus runs right up here and runs up under that acromion process and connects right here. So taken by itself, its job is to lift the shoulder up this way, and this is called adduction. So I'm sure you've seen the hip abduction machine and the hip adduction machine. Some people call it adduction. So abduction, think about stealing. You take something, you abduct with it, and you run away. So abduction means to move away from the center of the body. And adduction, adduction, means to bring towards the center of the body. And so the supraspinatus, its job is shoulder adduction. Most injuries for rotator cuff injuries are from the supraspinatus because it's riding underneath that acromion process and connects down here. But we're going to talk more about that later. So exercises that bring your shoulders up over your head, those are the exercises that are going to irritate it the most. Now let's look at the second muscle, the infraspinatus. It lies below the spine of the scapula. That's why it gets its name. And it sits right here in this hollow spot. And here you can see how it comes across the scapula and attaches to the top of the humerus and holds the shoulder joint in place. By itself, its job is called lateral
or external rotation. So you can see how the thumb is moving away from the center of the body.
The infraspinatus. As we learned in the video, it is responsible for lateral and external rotation of the shoulder joint. Now, that's what it does by itself. So here's something that you're going to see people do. They'll take a pair of dumbbells like this, and they'll say, I'm warming up my rotator cuff. Well, you're not. So resistance for that joint has to come this way. So if you're warming it up, you'd have to have a band either coming from this side or from the other side. When you're holding a pair of dumbbells like this, gravity is straight up and down. So the only resistance you have is this way. So the only exercise you're doing is a bicep isolation move. This is not warming up your rotator cuff.
Now, the teres minor, it sits below the infraspinatus and it attaches to your shoulder blade and then comes around the humerus onto that joint and attaches to it right there. In isolation, the teres minor provides lateral or external rotation, just like the infraspinatus.
The teres minor is very similar to the infraspinatus. Its job is lateral or external rotation of the shoulder. It works in conjunction with your teres major, which helps pull the arm down this way, and that's what you get with lat pull downs. But the teres minor, its job is primarily stability. If you feel like you've gotten a lot of value out of this video, then please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Masters Muscle.
The final muscle of the rotator cuff is the subscapularis, and it connects to the underside of your shoulder blade, next to your rib cage, and it comes around from the opposite direction of the humerus, which is help pulling that shoulder joint together. The subscapularis is the largest of the rotator cuff muscles, and it provides 50% of the cuff strength power. In isolation, it provides internal or medial rotation of the shoulder.
I can't point out where subscapularis is, but it's kind of like the opposite of infraspinatus and teres minor. Its job is what's called medial rotation, meaning turn to the inside, and internal rotation of the shoulder joint. So here's something I want you to keep in mind. Individually, the four muscles of the rotator cuff, they have specific job, whether it's internal or external rotation, shoulder adduction, but their job is what's called dynamic stability. Their job is to pull the shoulder joint in and hold it in place and offer stability, while the muscles that are superior to it, which means to go over the top of it, do the functions that they're supposed to do. The two most common type of injuries for your rotator cuff are out and out tears and tendonitis, with tendonitis probably being the most common, and mostly because of that supraspinatus tendon rubbing under the acromion process.
As I stated earlier, the rotator cuff provides dynamic stability while you're moving your arm around. Now, because of the complexity of this joint, it's prone to injury, especially from overuse. The supraspinatus is more prone to injury because it travels underneath this acromion process. Now, as when the arm is lifted up, it rubs up against the bottom of this process. Now, as you get older, this creates tendonitis, inflammation, and it starts to wear and rub on that tendon. Supraspinatus tendonitis happens along this area right here, and it also affects the bursa. And there are many bursas around your joints, hip and shoulder, and these help pad the tendons. And as you get older, they start to wear out and just don't work very well. When the tendon gets inflamed or the bursa gets inflamed. It causes a narrowing of this joint, and this is what's causing the problem. And this is why you'll feel achiness, and this is why you get tendonitis, or it'll just start to fray like near a rope that's getting too much friction on it. Another common problem are small bony spurs happen at the bottom of the acromion, and it will rub into the bursa or onto the tendon itself and cause problems. So most pain is felt between 60 and 20 degrees of motion, and this is why you have painful shoulder motion. And it's almost the whole range of motion, and this is a very common problem as you get older, and you just have to accept the fact that this might happen.
Is there anything that you can do to prevent rotary cuff injuries? Yes. Never use your shoulders. No, just kidding. You want to make sure that before every upper body workout that you warm up your shoulders. And I got to tell you this, a lot of it is the luck of the draw and your genetics. I do not have the best genetics in the world, and some people are just going to be more prone to this than others. It also depends upon your profession. So if you're using your shoulders a lot, your odds are going to increase that you're going to have a rotary cuff injury. Nutrition plays an important part of this too. You want to make sure that if you're working out, that you always get enough protein, collagen, peptides, fish oils, all these things that are going to help your joints. And most important of all, you want to make sure that you use good biomechanical form. And if you watch these two videos right here, then you will learn more about the correct biomechanical forms for your shoulders and your chest.